First up, Zaha Nasser. She's Egypt's Minister of Investment and International Cooperation. Also with us here, I've got to get my teeth in, it's getting colder here, I can't speak, is John Defteris, my colleague from Abu Dhabi, of course, CNN's Emerging Markets editor. Let me start with you, Minister, because I feel a sense of renewed confidence from the Egyptian delegation here. What is your message to those gathered here in Davos and to the rest of the world this week?
Indeed, that's a very powerful delegation coming from Egypt, headed by His Excellency the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, and indeed we have a clear message to transmit, which is we have been very successful in implementing a bold and comprehensive economic reform program. We're starting to reap the fruits of this reforms, and hence we are here to transmit a message that Egypt is being repositioned to attract more investments and that we're ready to do business with all our stakeholders, whether from the private sector or our partners from the international financial institutions.
Well, let's drill down on some of the numbers, John.
Yeah, in fact, the growth is looking strong for 2018-19 in your fiscal year, 6%, which is very solid. Oil and gas independency now because of the big discoveries you had in the Mediterranean. How do you pull the investment outside of oil and gas because of the reforms you're getting here? Are you getting the FDI with the stability and stronger growth?
Absolutely. We've moved forward with a very comprehensive and impactful economic reform program with a key pillar of attracting more private sector participation into the economy. We've done a lot of reforms that, John, you're very much aware of, which improve the business environment and also encouraging the private sector to come into strategic areas that they were not participating in, such as the energy, renewable energy, not just gas and oil, but also more important, the renewable energy sector. And that's something we're very proud of. I look at Bimban, one of the largest solar plants worldwide, and that's where it is in Upper Egypt.
This is a great message to the international community, to Egyptians living at home who face inflation rates, for example, of upwards of 50%. What's the message domestically, and are you concerned about the possible sort of fallout from statistics like that?
I think let's look at the numbers, and it's very important. It's true that global FDIs has been in stagnation or a bit of a slowdown, but more important is to look at Egypt's share of this FDI. Egypt's share of FDI has been picking up globally, and that's impressive in itself. And you're right, we look carefully into the implication of this bold reform program. So I have here to reflect that President Sisi has put a grand vision for Egypt, but the government has made sure that we also put the mitigation measures and to address any adverse selection. So even on inflation pressure, Egypt has done very well on that front, and it's reflected in the number. Going back to your point on FDI, Egypt is ranked as one of the top 10 economies in attracting FDI and in generating growth. We're also #1 in terms of African continents. I think it's an important context, as Egypt will be chairing very soon the African Union within a few days' time.
Yeah, you have concerns now about the sporadic attacks that we still see in tourism. I know the president is trying to secure the region. Tourism numbers did recover, so you got a boost in your growth because of that. But how do you convince investors, look, I want to use this as a base, a big market, 90 million consumers, to leapfrog into Africa, to come into Europe? But you can't ignore there's still a security issue in the country.
In fact, the security issue in Egypt has been improved significantly, and that you can see in the context of all the neighboring countries, and that's very visible. And in fact, that's what the perception of the investors. They see Egypt as a destination, they see Egypt as a gateway to Africa, and that's why you'll see that a lot of multinationals and big companies are investing now in Egypt, either expansions or even green investments. So the security is one of the main areas where we've done a lot of achievements and progress there.
You won't be surprised for me to ask that with this renewed sense of optimism, and the numbers are clearly pretty impressive, what opportunity for a renewed environment whereby human rights abuses don't make headlines around the world in Egypt, and actually maybe the economic numbers might sort of surpass it? What's being done? Is this an administration that cares?
The administration cares a lot, and I think human rights here includes, it's a wide definition for so many things. So, for example, one of the key areas is the right for young people to participate effectively in the social, political, and economic sphere. The right of each Egyptian to get access to the wide range of services they need, and the right to speak up. And I think that's also very represented and reflected in the numbers. So if you look at the number of parliamentarians young who are actively participating and speaking out loudly regarding their concerns with the reform programs and their aspirations, their active participation even on social media, I think that's very visible in Egypt. So that's a priority, but I think it's also important that we are here at the World Economic Forum to also to transmit as a government our clear message of transparency, inclusion in all aspects of life.
I'd love to carry on. There's lots more to discuss, and I know that John's chomping at the bit, but we've got to take a very short break. So,
Thank you so much, Becky. It's lovely to be with you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much.
Stay right there.